It was 8 degrees 16 years ago when I came to my first inauguration, my only inauguration. And the Jeffersonian conservative values that came to Richmond that day are what set a course for the next 20 years here in Virginia and in the nation. We're proud to have with us today a fan of Americans for Prosperity, a helper. He is an American for Prosperity. He's our former governor. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor George Allen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, patriots all, isn't it a great day to be alive in the Commonwealth of Virginia? All of y'all in Virginia, last November sent a message that was heard all across America, and indeed all across the world. It was one that I think Americans for Prosperity has been advocating, and Ben Markey and I have last year went on a bus tour across Virginia on the Hands Off Our Healthcare bus tour. I was talking about that as well as energy, and you saw people riled up. You saw people stirred. You saw people concerned, but they were showing up. And you saw a change in the wind. And then you saw the objections to what was going on in Washington, D.C. with this spending, these mountains of debt, loading future generations with perpetual debt. And folks were saying, we're not going to take it. And they saw the mandates and the dictates in this healthcare experiment, spending $1 trillion that we don't have on something that we don't want. And they saw them trying to ration and tax our energy and make us more dependent on foreign sources of energy. And you saw people getting riled up. And that's why Ben and Tim, what they do with Americans for Prosperity is make sure that people have an avenue, a place, a voice. Because all of y'all here and people all across the country are the owners of the government. They're not the folks in bureaucracies. They're not the people in courthouses. They're not the people anywhere else but in the roads and communities and homes and businesses, large, medium, and small across this country. And it is important that we continue to make sure our voices are known. Because, my friends, those folks up in Washington, D.C., and Bob Goodlatte mentioned it, and Fireball Bill Bowling mentioned it, talking about I call him Fireball Bill Bowling. It just seems, and he doesn't mind the nickname. Those folks up in Washington, D.C. are disconnected. They're out of touch with folks. They seem about as clueless as a hog looking at a Timex watch. And it is important that our voices are heard, and I look forward in the future to working with Americans for Prosperity. What is great about the inauguration of Bob McDonald and Bill Bowling and Ken Cuccinelli is that where the best ideas are going to come from are not out of Washington, D.C. Everything up in Washington, D.C. seems to be counterproductive, harmful, burdensome, and so forth. And so the best ideas are going to come from the people in the states. And that's the way that our founders designed it. That's why there's the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, that those powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the people or the states. And I like this protect and advance. It's almost a football type term. You got to play tenacious defense and you have to be on offense. You just can't say no to everything, which is important to do. You got to play tenacious defense. It's absolutely essential that we have positive, constructive ideas as alternatives that are consistent with our principles. And what I love about Virginia is our history. The cradle of American liberty started as an enterprise in 1607, 13 years before those pilgrims landed up at Plymouth Rock. And, well, we like Massachusetts if they vote right on Tuesday. And I think that Republicans, and really it's going to be conservatives, are going to vote right in Massachusetts, and that'll be a shot just like Lexington and Concord across in Massachusetts. But in Virginia, I've always called myself a creative, conservative, common sense Jeffersonian conservative. And Mr. Jefferson said in his 1801 inaugural address that he defined the sum of good government, as a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, but otherwise leave them free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and that the government should not take from the mouths of labor the bread they have earned. I hope you agree that is still the sum of good government today. And here in Virginia, in the McDonnell administration, you're going to see the application of those principles. Susan was reminding me that on that day where it was 8 degrees, the pen froze as I signed my first executive order, creating what we called a strike force to look at reducing government waste expenditures. And indeed, it was the ink froze and somebody had a warmer pen and I signed it. And when you talk about regulations, we went through all the regulations in Virginia over a 4-year period. We eliminated 25% of the regulations altogether. 50% were altered or amended. Only 25% stayed the same. That sort of approach of looking at what is the government doing? How is it? Is there a reason for regulation? In government, you have sometimes a mindset of pack mules, that you just keep doing things the same old way. And the rationale was, why are you doing this regulation this way? Oh, we've done it this way since Governor Godwin. Well, no, well, why are you doing it? Well, we've always done it that way. No, that's not an excuse. You got to scrutinize every bit of spending, every regulation, every tax, because again, it's your government, and the government needs to serve the people, and its just powers are from the consent of the governed. You look up in Washington, Bob Goodlatte's darn right. They need a balanced budget up in Washington like we have in Virginia. The president ought to have the line item veto to knock out wasteful pork barrel spending. And there ought to be one other thing, at least one other thing that I think is a good taxpayer protection, and that is to treat the members of Congress the way people in the private sector are. And if they did, year after year after year, they never get the appropriations bills done on time. It ends up being some omnibus bill passed right before Christmas. No one knows what's in it till you read about it later. My view is if they don't get the appropriations bills done on time on October 1st, you withhold their pay. You withhold their pay until you get it done, and you'd have greater scrutiny and accountability in spending.